and say welcome back to the Everyone Can Contribute Cafe meetup. Today with security and specifically Aqua Security and open source tools. And it's my pleasure to say hi to Anaïs. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, awesome.
We kind of made a joke before the meeting that she's changing jobs more often than we do our meetups. No, just kidding. It's we had her for showing us how to work with Cyber Cloud. See, still saying it wrong. And now she's moved into a more security focused role, I would say. I don't know what's coming, what you have prepared, but yeah, let's try to get started.
Awesome. Yeah, so hi everybody. I know like some of you know me already from the previous meetup, but also like for everybody watching online, I'm a developer advocate at Aqua Security. I joined their open source team a month ago. So I'm still very new to those tools as well. When I was preparing for this meetup, I was running into problems and figuring out things and like everybody else getting started with those tools that I'm going to show you today. And we want to make it really like a conversation, right? So this is not like I didn't prepare like a presentation style kind of meetup where I just talk for an hour. So feel free to jump in if you have like for those who are live here, for those who are present, and if you have any questions, like even in the chat, and then I'm sure somebody from the organizers can interrupt me and read the questions, or you can also come with your camera and just like online and just ask, right? So feel free to interrupt me. And yeah, I'm going to share my screen now, and then we're going to get started talking about the different Aqua open source tools. I'm going to share my entire screen, which is a bit risky, but then I can easily switch back and forth. So shout if there's something that you shouldn't see, but I close everything, so you shouldn't. So it should all be good. But yeah, I have you like kind of like down here, like in case I'm looking down, I'm looking at you. Yeah, so this is the GitHub account for Aqua Security. And we have several projects. Now, we are mainly focusing, and my role is what I'm working with is mainly focused on 3 projects, which is Trivy, Starboard, and Tracee. Now, when you get started with this project, it might be like confusing of like, when do you use which ones? Why will you use either of them, right? And they have different kind of focuses of where, like which part of your application security you're addressing with each tool, let's say. So I kind of prepared a little bit on each of those tools. We're just going to go through them. That was my idea. So with Trivy, you can scan container images, but also infrastructure as code for vulnerabilities and misconfiguration. So here's kind of this overview where Trivy fits in. Now and that's kind of the feedback that I've heard. It's a bit confusing because people see it as part of the stack, but it ultimately just says that with Trivy, you can scan your container images for vulnerabilities, your file system as well. So you can also scan for example, your Go application for vulnerabilities and misconfiguration, and also your infrastructure as code, but also like Git repositories, for example. So Trivy really is at the point when before you start using resources, that's when you use Trivy of like to scan them and see like what's wrong with those resources. Like, do you want to use somebody else's Git repository, for example, or maybe you want to stay away from it, or which container image should you be using for your application, or be dependent on within your own container images. Yeah, so with Trivy, how you can get started, it's pretty straightforward once you find the the documentation, which tells you how to install it. I can also show links here, and you can kind of play around with it alongside the meetup if that's useful, or if not, I can just show whatever you prefer. What do you prefer? Yeah, should I just show things?
You can show things, but if you want to drop in links in the chat, I can also post them on social.
Okay, later on, I'm going to probably share some more important links. Yeah, so these are some different installation options. And once you have Trivy installed, and I'm going to just start here, you have access to it. And it's pretty like straightforward in terms of like scanning images. So for example, if I want to scan a container image, I would just post Trivy image and then the image that I want to scan. So for example, this Python image, and what it's going to do, it's then going to access some, depending on what I'm scanning, it's going to access the relevant databases. And in this case, it's downloading the database, but you can also install Trivy in like a enclosed environment where you would have the cache for the database safe and then temporarily updated, if that makes sense. So in this case, it's going to access it remotely, and then it's going to basically give you a list of the different vulnerabilities that you have within the container image, and like the severity of the container of the vulnerability, where you can find further information, and the fixed version. Or you can also specify, for example, Trivy image. And you can specify, for example, ignore unfixed. So if you only want to see the vulnerabilities that are that already have a fixed version available, right? Like you don't want to see security vulnerabilities that just maybe are not specific to they're not updated yet, like they don't have like a fix. Or you can like filter by the information that are important to you. For your specific use case. What else? There's something else I wanted to show. Yeah, you can also skip, like if you want to scan faster, you can skip the database update, for example. So Trivy image scan is like, it's I would say it's pretty straightforward. Like you just specify the container image. Now, I think if I just take a container image from Docker Hub or another remote registry, it's gonna like pull the image first, and then it's going to scan the image in the same way. Now, in this case, I already had the image. Now, this tool is also, Trivy is also used in Starboard, which you're going to look at in a second, like later on. Are there any questions? Log4j image scan. Should I scan that image? Is that what you mean?
If you want, you can also scan that image, which shows some log4j vulnerabilities with Trivy.
I actually haven't looked at Trivy, and then just the
image and the URL.
The URL like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. There are lots of things I haven't done yet.
The thing is, when Log4j was announced somehow in December, we were keen on like how to detect the vulnerabilities. So you really need to build a vulnerable app, and someone did already. So this helps to verify and prove that the security scanner is actually working. And this kind of says, hey, Trivy is able to detect and help mitigate the different CVEs and vulnerabilities.
But that's also the problem with, and I have to learn more about it, but like with the different vulnerability scanners, that some of them, like they access the information from different sources, right? So some of them will be updated as well faster, or like classify different vulnerabilities as vulnerabilities versus other scanning tools. So for example, there's some examples where like in this case, I think Log4j was like in Trivy right away. Like,
yeah, it was added pretty fast over the weekend, I think. So Trivy was relatively fast there, and other open source scanners like Gripe or what else did I test?
Claire? Did you test Claire? Is that Claire's a thing? No. Sneak?
I think so. But yeah, I was like really looking into the details of how can I detect that, and how can I help like users and customers scanning their whole environment, because it's not just like one container image or one repository to scan, but the whole, I don't know, 10,000 projects to see whether they are affected or not.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think Trivy is like, it's super easy to use. I've installed it with Homebrew on macOS as well. You can also just install it in your CI/CD container image.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's up to you what you're building. You could also use the GitLab SAST integration, of course, but Trivy itself has, I think, somewhere in the documentation, the integration into CI/CD is described for many different tools.
So right now we have it on advanced. I'm in the process of restructuring everything, so don't rely on it. Like, I'm trying to make to make it more visible. But yeah, here you have, for example, GitLab, and then you have like the and then I think also GitLab is integrating actually with your scanner with Trivy, from what I heard.
Yeah, it's the default currently.
Awesome. Yeah, so here, for example, additional examples. Yeah.
But I'm kind of distracting you. Sorry.
Just a little bit. Let me wait. Okay. So you can also right now I'm in the example repository within the Trivy repository, like just with the Trivy repository from GitHub, and you have like here some example infrastructure as code files. So for example, the mixed one. And in here you have config. So let's check out mixed configs. So you have like a Docker file, and then you have the deployment YAML, and then you have some Terraform. So as you can see, they have like Kubernetes, Docker file, Terraform, but you can scan all of them at once if you say Trivy and then Trivy config. My hands are cold. And then it's just scanning all, like, everything that's related to your infrastructure as code. And that's also, we had, like, when I joined, a huge discussion of what is infrastructure as code. Right now we define like Dockerfile, anything that kind of defines you or is part of your deployment as infrastructure as code, and that's what you can scan. There's a question. So, wow, that was fast. Sorry, I was even surprised. So there's a question for Terraform. Is there a practical difference between Trivy and tfsec? So Trivy uses tfsec from what I know under the hood. So it's integrating with tfsec. You can use tfsec directly, but there shouldn't be a difference from what I know. Now, I could be wrong because I just joined Aqua, but from what I know, there's no difference.
Maybe Trivy parses the tfsec format and presents the same format which you would otherwise get with container image scanning, but I didn't verify that.
Yeah,
could be worth a try.
Let me quickly stop sharing. And actually, I thought there was something open that I didn't want to have open. So yeah, so could be. What else? What else would you like to see that Trivy does? It can, well, so for vulnerabilities, you have, well, you can scan container image, you can scan file systems. So you basically put the path to the file system. So for example, you can scan a Go application or another application for misconfigurations, for example. You can scan, which is handy in like containers. Like you can go into a container and then scan the root file system of the container for vulnerabilities as well. You can scan Git repositories just by specifying Trivy and then the repository and the URL to the repository. We can do this. Let's do this. I don't know. Like the thing is, I think it gets more interesting like once you dig into the details, right? Versus high overview. Like these are the different things that it can do. Yeah. Any comments? Any questions regarding Trivy? Otherwise, we can and you can also, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, mostly what's interesting here. So when you use it in Docker, so we use it, for example, in the company integrated in Harbor. So Harbor.io is also using it. So they use also Trivy. Claire and how Trivy in containers is working, that it pulls the data and then doing all the security checks locally in a Trivy container. So he's extracting the whole file system in the end and then is doing the check. So it's quite interesting because then you see a lot of pulls when Trivy is standing on push. So that means like, hey, you're pushing a new image to your registry, and then Trivy is triggered via webhook, and then you can get the reports. And also there's Prometheus metrics available. So you need to have like an exporter for that, I think. Or it could be also probably now built in, but we used before an exporter for that. So that
I think you mean Starboard for that.
No, Trivy was also
mean
possible.
Trivy? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen the exporter. I actually set up the exporter for, and I want to show you like with Prometheus, the setup and everything to get the vulnerabilities report from Starboard. But yeah, we're going to get to that after this. Yeah, but I haven't seen it for Trivy. I didn't know there was a thing. Like sometimes I'm talking to people in like either on GitHub or any open source team, and they mention things to me. I didn't know it existed.
Yeah, but I learned also today that you can use it not only for containers, we're using it only for Docker containers, so that you can also use it for other tools, like in your infrastructure stack. That's really cool. So for EAC and so on.
Yeah, so you can scan your pure Kubernetes manifest. We will add a Helm integration soon, so you can scan your Helm charts before deploying them, for example. Right now you have to template them first and then scan the templated resources. What else? Yeah, you can also scan, like if you're using CloudFormation, you can scan that as well. What I wanted to show you is policies. Is it there? Where is it? Is it here or is it here? You can, with Rego, you can specify your own policies. Here's an example that we could take a look at. So you can basically specify like when you scan Kubernetes manifest, you can specify which ports, for example, shouldn't be used with Rego. And then I'm trying to find an example. Where is it? Here, that's an example. Whatever it does. If you're trying to speak and read at the same time. So you can basically specify different like things that shouldn't be included or things that should be included into that manifest, right? So for example, let's say you only want to allow people to use for services cluster IP, you could specify this through Rego and say only cluster IP can be used as a type, as a service type. Anything else can't be used. Maybe there's some better examples. So, so for example, in Combine, you have the policy. So policy, oh, that's policy. Custom, and here, what does it specify? Here it's checking if the labels, I think, to select the label is the same between the service and the deployment. So if they both have the same label, so they can connect with each other, right? That's something that you can specify through Rego, for example. And you would use also Rego for the other tools as well to specify like custom policies that you want to enforce in your resources. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody's so quiet.
So it's
you can drop in. Okay, awesome. So then how do I get? I want to change to there's Tracee, and I want to look at Trivy now at Starboard. Where's Starboard? Let's go back. So what you do with Starboard, and that's kind of where I see the main difference. And oh, Engen, I think was in the call now, like was here somewhere or in the chat. I think he joined. Cool that you contributed if you're still here. Yeah, I think you're still here, right? So cool, nice. Anyway, so Starboard is basically used to scan for vulnerabilities within your Kubernetes cluster. So vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, either namespace specific or cluster wide. That's when you basically install Starboard. and you can install Starboard either as Kubernetes operator, so it lives within your cluster as an operator, and whenever you deploy a new resource, that's when Starboard different scans that are custom resource definitions, and they show as part of like as Kubernetes resources, they show your vulnerabilities and everything that came like out in those scans. So for example, instead of like, well, we use Trivy, or we just use Trivy to scan our container image and our file system for vulnerabilities, you can use Starboard will also do vulnerability scans, but then display the output as custom resource definitions. So you have them as Kubernetes resources. We can take a look. I'm going to show you that in a second, how that looks like. But yeah, so you basically have the Kubernetes operator and the command, and going to the, this is in rough, like, I mean, this isn't very like, I would say more detail actually, how it all works. I'm not going to go into detail in this because I think this is a really detailed drawing of how it works. I can make a more high level drawing we can talk about if that's interesting. But yeah, you have basically within the operator, you have different options. You can either use directly kubectl or Helm. I never used the operator lifecycle manager, so that might be interesting. But yeah, I used Helm mainly to deploy the operator, Starboard operator. So right now I have in my clusters, I have an example cluster running, and I have, ooh, did I lose the connection? Let's access it. So I can show you everything that's installed. And that's why I kind of want to use Argo as well, because so right now I have through Argo CD, I have Starboard installed, the Starboard operator, and then the Starboard exporter, and which we're gonna talk about in a second. And as you can see, like Argo CD can't really like control the custom resource definitions that are used for Starboard. That's why they are yellow. It's not that something is out of place. But basically, so you have the Starboard operator that's living within the Starboard system namespace, and you will tell the Starboard operator which namespaces it should control and scan for. And then, for example, when I deploy an application, once I deploy the application, it will run automatically the config audit reports and the vulnerability reports on my application, like on my deployment. Now, the thing is that, or the interesting thing is, I found it interesting when I got started, that each of those vulnerability reports, they are part of the life cycle of the deployment itself. So you delete the deployment and the resource is going to be deleted as well, which I think is really nicely visualized through Argo CD, that it's not like those reports that you get are going to be part of your deployment versus of the operator itself, if that makes sense. So whenever I would update the container image that's run within this application, where is it? Is this the pod? No, this is the deployment. The other one was the service. So if I update the container image, that's when a new security scan would be triggered by the Starboard operator. Any questions? Any input? Any thoughts?
So you can use Starboard to call Trivy in the background, I think, to scan running container images.
So it does it automatically. The Starboard operator does it automatically. Like all I did really was deploy the Starboard operator. So, and let me show you how I deployed it. So it's like all I did was here, Argo CD Starboard. Can you see this? Is this big enough? So this is all I did. It's just the Helm chart, right? So I specified first of all, the Starboard operator from this repository, chat repository, and I installed it to the Argo CD namespace, this resource, because it's managed by Argo CD. So Argo CD will then know where to take the chart from and which chart and which version of the chart. And then it can apply the specific values that I want to change. So in this case, I told it I want to have the target namespace, my app namespace within my cluster, within my Kubernetes cluster. And similar to Trivy, I can specify additional like flags such as ignore unfixed. Like I don't want to know about any unfixed vulnerabilities because they just noise from me when I'm looking at my vulnerability reports. So then that's going to be deployed, like the Helm chart is going to be deployed within my cluster, which I can show you here as well. Going to add.
And
so.
When you define custom policies, that kind of works the same way then.
So when I define custom policies, I would, how would it work through Starboard? So through Trivy, I guess I would apply them part of it as part of the values. I would say, here's the custom policy file that I want to use, like as part of Trivy, but we can look actually at the Helm values. So going to, is this Starboard? Where am I? No, this is Trivy. This is Starboard. So if I'm here within Helm, I can check out the Helm values. And let's look for Trivy. And
it might be an advanced question, but I was curious.
Yeah, no, this is actually something I haven't looked at so far. So we have here. So we have your Trivy, right? Create. This is a good question. I'm not sure how you would pass it in. Maybe you would deploy it separately, but severity. So you can specify which severity you want to see. But yeah, the custom like the regular policies that I showed you earlier, right? Do you see
maybe
it? I don't see it.
We can look it up later on. Maybe let's try
if I look
to.
For Rego. Kubernetes here. No, is this where I would do it? Policy. Yeah,
Probably.
no. I haven't tried it yet. That might be like as part of config maps. That would make sense. I could imagine. Policies.
And if it doesn't exist yet, we have kind of made a feature request. But
policies, how do you?
I think it should be.
No,
it
it's
should be
config
working.
maps. No, but no,
Yeah.
this is not really, well, yeah, and here in the Rego code, that's how you would do it, right?
But in order to create a policy, we need to know about the vulnerabilities first. So we might trigger actual vulnerabilities in your Kubernetes cluster first before discussing policies.
Yeah, I mean, you could set policies before you actually go ahead and right, like some things that you might want to enforce all the time, right? And then the vulnerabilities would be more. So the way I see it, vulnerabilities, like once you get the reports on the vulnerabilities, it already happened, right? Like, but yeah, for the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, you would see which misconfigurations are present within your cluster and which ones you want to, like what enforcement, like what policies, yeah, you're right. What policies you want to create to enforce, to not get those misconfigurations, right? That's kind of it.
But wouldn't we have like getting for enforcing policies in when we're talking about vulnerabilities? So there we have like in common index, so the CVSS score that you can use to get how critical a vulnerability is for you, and then you can say, okay, we want to stop the deployment when the score is higher than 5. You have a scale from 1 to 10. Yeah,
you can do it. Yeah, I think you can do it. So I had a conversation about something similar with somebody, but I think you would do it in your, if you want to do it through your deployment, like when your deployment happens, you would do it for Trivy, or I would do it for Trivy, I guess, that I basically say, if you can specify through Trivy, like that it should return like an error code, and then like the deployment should fail, the pipeline should fail. You could do that, like if the if the severity is critical, then the deployment should fail. If it's not critical, then the deployment should go through. You could do this with Trivy. That's kind of where I see, like, I haven't, I guess where you would use, or you would use the Starboard CLI, like also in your CI/CD pipeline, like if the Kubernetes, well, no, you would do it like after you're deployed, right? Because the deployments would already have to run in your cluster.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a Trivy exporter.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think we had it for the time. I think Philip shared it. So then you can, it's running in Kubernetes in a pod, and then you can get also the metrics.
Oh, this is amazing. Thank you for sharing.
It's from Philip.
It scans Trivy and then saves the result in a config map, and then the config map is dashboard in Grafana then.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and right now. Yeah, go ahead.
I think for the policies, Chris mentioned in the chat, Aqua Enterprise does have some features in that regard.
Yeah, runtime protection is kind of the that's the bit you have to pay for, and that will block containers based on scan results and stuff like that. Yeah.
That will block containers based on scan results.
Yeah, so it will block images that Aqua hasn't seen before. So if you've not run a CI/CD scan or you've not registered, it won't allow you to deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster or anything else. But also, like if it's you can mark it as non-compliant. So if it's got vulnerabilities above critical, well, above medium or high or whatever you want,
yeah,
them. And you can define custom policies based on different environments. So you can be a bit more relaxed with dev. So you can define a dev policy which says mediums and highs are okay, no criticals, and in production you can be a bit stricter. And that's kind of that's the stuff you get with Aqua Enterprise. Otherwise you could probably cobble it all together using the open source components, but it's just a bit more work.
I don't know where, like, so for runtime, what part is the runtime security? Like if I say scan the container, like I don't want to discuss with you right now on the call what I can do with open source versus enterprise. But
how it does it. I can tell it without using AquaSec. So if someone is interested in it, so
not using AquaSec. No, this is not an option here.
No, I can tell you how to do it though. We run a daemon set on the cluster, and that basically uses a mutating webhook off the back of the mission controller, and then it just makes a call to say, that container is trying to run. Is it clean or is it not? And it'll fail it based on that. And obviously that's a callback to the enterprise product, but it could be a hook to Trivy or something like that and scan it on the fly. Obviously it'll slow things down a little bit, or you can build your own whatever you want off the back of it, basically. We've just obviously done the work to do that, but it is just using the admission controller in Kubernetes.
Yeah. Or another option is to do it in the pipeline. So if you're doing not GitOps, you're doing a push model, you're checking it in a step in the pipeline before.
Yeah, exactly. Just have it as just a checkpoint on your deployment job. Yeah. We've got customers that do that too, that rather than going all out on runtime protection, they'll just use CI/CD.
But you can do runtime protection with Tracee.
Yeah, it's.
Well, I won't. This isn't. I can go on about the runtime protection is more than just stopping containers. It's drift prevention and blocking reverse shells and lots of other stuff. But this is.
And you're telling me I can't do it with Tracee?
You could if you want to do all the development, 7 years of dev. You could probably get there.
I will ask you, Ty, afterwards what I can do, and then I'm gonna see.
You can probably do a lot of those things, but obviously it's a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely.
You can also do it with GitOps, Niklas. You can just pre-render the Helm charts and then.
No. So I have a question probably to
nobody
Tracee,
nobody will push. Come on.
Sorry, Anaïs, for jumping in.
But let's.
No, go ahead. This is an interesting conversation. Let's keep this going.
I want to understand Tracee right now because.
We're gonna get there.
Okay, so then I'm quiet. Then I'll
okay.
Because...
so what I wanted to basically show is that I just deployed the Starboard operator, And the Starboard exporter is external right now. That's also right now created by externally by another team. They created that generously. So so I've deployed those two, and I'm running them inside my cluster. They are just normal Helm charts that are deployed. And through that, I, for example, have now the metrics from Starboard. They are here, like, and I can access, like, for example, so all the metrics. I haven't like gone through them in detail, but this is like where you get all of the everything, right? And then you can access them in Prometheus through called service monitors, right? So Prometheus is basically checking the metrics from Starboard, and part of the metrics that's reporting on is the vulnerability reports, like what vulnerabilities have been found in. So for example, I have here 20 high vulnerabilities in my, I think in my cluster, or is it just in my application? It's just the app namespace. Yeah, it's just the for the application, my React application running in my app namespace. That's like the vulnerabilities that it found. So you can then also like create nice dashboards that I haven't gotten to yet, where you display all of that, right? Yeah, and you can also, I mean, alternatively, you can also just go to, where is it? To your cluster and just look for vulnerability report, and then you should see a vulnerability report. And oh, it's in Starboard system namespace. So namespace, and in the app namespace, I could have just gotten all, and vulnerability report. And then I will see the vulnerability report. So if I change the deployment, it will the Starboard operator will spin up a new job, and that will basically scan, do a one-time scan on my new deployment. Like if I change, for example, the image tag here of my deployment. But yeah, it's really high level because I want to go like over all of the tools, and we might get stuck in Tracee as well. Now, anything else you want to see on Starboard? Any questions on how Starboard works? So it's really like just, oops, that I have all my monitoring stuff, and then the Starboard operator and the Starboard exporter and my application, and I tell Starboard which namespace to monitor. Now it can also make cluster-wide scans and pen tests on my cluster and things like that through Starboard, through the Starboard operator as well.
I have a question. Did you? But before yeah, then
go first. No, yeah, Engin, you want to go first?
Oh, it's okay. So yeah, I just ask. Maybe you explained it before and I missed it. Could you show maybe how we can exchange the compliance part of Starboard from Polaris to Conftest, and how to upload a Rego policy into this Conftest? Because to be honest, I did not understand the documentation, and I hope that maybe you can show this in a simple, I don't know, deny whatever. Or
I haven't done that yet. I've seen the documentation where you can, is it? No, where is it? Integrations. Where is it? So you have your Conftest. Have you seen this part?
Yes, this part was, this I saw, but then it gets a little bit complicated for me.
Okay, let me help you tomorrow, because I think this is going to take more time.
Okay, no problem.
For me to answer this question. Yeah, let me help you tomorrow in figuring that out.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Or in updating the documentation, right? This is great feedback that it's not clear on how to update from Polaris to Conftest. So basically, Starboard is using lots of different scanners to get the information into custom resource definitions. Yeah, that's how you can envision it, or I envision it, I guess.
Just one question to this configuration checker. Are there any plans to include maybe Kubescape, for example? Because so how is it for additional checkers? For example, Kubescape from Armo, for example, because their results are also quite interesting. Are there any plans, or is it something I could do for them because it's open?
Right now, how I see it is that, from what I know, oh God, I hope I'm not saying something wrong, and then later they're gonna realize. With Starboard right now, I see it as I mean, it's integrating with different scanners, right? But it's the goal is to have different well, you can see it in the road, but you can it's right now it's like the goal is to expand the types of checks that it's doing, so you can run different out of the box, different type of scans depending on what your application has to comply with. That's kind of the goal, or like moving into that direction. So it's I haven't like looked into detailed comparison between Starboard and Kubescape yet, so I can't really comment on that. If you can see, like if you see benefit in having Kubescape integrated, you can definitely open up an issue and propose your thoughts there, share your thoughts there. But from what I've seen is that it's kind of like evolving like in different directions in a way to some extent. I don't want to say anything wrong, like I feel since I'm just getting started with those tools, but that's like, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm going to look into that as well.
Okay, that would be nice. I mean, just to see
Awesome.
how to extend it with some additional checks would be very interesting.
Yes.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot. Thanks, Anaïs.
If you're missing any checks, do let us know. Like if there's anything that you're kind of missing and that you can find, like please do reach out, because this is definitely like we rely on this kind of input. Yeah. So we have like 15 minutes, I guess. So we can take
I have one last question.
Okay.
Only
Last
for
question.
Starboard.
And then we go
So,
into Tracee.
To the report. So it's also possible to get it via CLI, right? So you're not forced to get it from Prometheus. You can use the Starboard CTL or control in the end to get the reports. It's like a convenient way to use it when you don't want to get above metrics.
Can you repeat that?
Was it too small? So when I started with Starboard, I inserted via the CLI in the end about the CLI, and then you have also Starboard control. What's really cool because then you get easily the reports, all of that. That's what I wanted only to mention here.
How do you get easily the reports?
When you have Starboard CLI, you can say show policy and he shows you everything.
Oh
it's
yeah,
like,
it shows everything. So you don't have to go into the cluster. That's what you mean. You also exactly. So you can show is it through the CLI where you also show like where you can like open a page and see like everything? No, that's tricky.
Oh, that's
well, wait for it. Yeah. So yeah. So but exactly like through the CLI you can get also the reports in a different way. But we're working on making it even easier. So you don't have to like also with the operator, you don't have to go into the cluster and always like fetch out the right, like all the reports. So I want to show you Tracee as a last thing. So Tracee is runtime security and it uses under the hood eBPF. And no, I'm super new to eBPF and anything that's it's basically running below my application, if that makes sense. But what's cool with Tracee is that you can basically have it, for example, running within your cluster, and then either check for specific processes, like if there are specific calls made by an application or by somebody within the cluster, then it can, for example, alert you. So if somebody is using some debugging processes within your cluster, and that's kind of what the example is for, but I can't run it right now on my laptop because I have an M1. So I will show you in the cluster like some examples on how you can use Tracee. So you can either use it directly from the binary or you can use it through a container as well. And so if you have like a Intel-based machine, then you can run these commands. So you can, for example, run this and then in one terminal, and then run in another one Tracee ls, and then you can kind of see like an example of it. That's how you could replicate it. But the thing is, why you would want to use Tracee, for example, is when you or like eBPF, when you want to have when you want to monitor processes that are within the kernel space. So you can do it with kind of or like some daemon sets, right? That's how you call them. Can do similar monitoring, but then they go like kind of back and forth between like the pod they are in and like and the underlying infrastructure versus with Tracee, it can kind of live within the kernel space itself and for example monitor what's going on there in very simple terms. So you can like monitor processes. There are also lots of other use cases I still have to dig into that are more like, for example, resource usage by different applications. Like you can monitor, that's also interesting for observability, that you can monitor which application use how many resources, what is like, and then have alerting based on like if there are any resource spikes and things like that as well. So there are lots of use cases. We have as a main use case kind of security or focus. I mean, Tracee on security, but there are also other use cases that I plan to showcase in future demos as well. No, what I did is to use Tracee and kind of show you some parts is that you basically, so in here, I'm logged into one of my nodes from my cluster, one of my demo nodes, and then, oh no, this is not good. Okay, let me, what just happened? Okay, maybe let me close this and log in again, kubectl get notes. And then I found a tool called kubectl node shell. And you can kind of, what it does, I'm going to show you in a second. So here, that's basically it. Kubectl node shell, and then it's opening up a container within your cluster that has additional privileges, so you can basically access the node. Now on here, I can now run the Tracee command that I showed you. I think this is it. Now I have to remember the commands. Somebody showed me right before this call. So what happens if I run this? There was an error if I would just run it like this. This is the error. So we kind of found a workaround, and this is specific to Google, that they have a modified version of their Linux that they run on their nodes, which prevents right now Tracee from working out of the box. That's what we found out right before this call, or like kind of when I was setting it up earlier today. Now what you can do is, if I say trace, it's gonna trace, or it's supposed to trace. I think it's basically tracing, like showing everything that's happening within that node right now. This is like all boom, right? All of this is system calls that are like all of the default ones are shown right now. Now you can also let's list. What does that do again? So here it right now shows just the default system calls, but you can also like filter for specific system calls that you want to monitor. So these are like all of the ones that you can monitor out of the box. It's a long list. And this is kind of what Tracee does, as it's like if you use it right away, of how you can use it from the docs, and then you can like let me.
You could, for example, filter for listen to see open ports and open sockets.
Yeah. I don't know how to do that. But yeah.
Yeah, just for the syscall listen. I don't know the exact command for that. What is the filter
Just
command?
List. Yeah, the filter command, that's what I had earlier, which is like, what is the filter command? It was
maybe -F.
Was it trace and then what
listen?
was it? Well, if I, how can I? No, this is not it.
Or you could
help. You can check out the
you can,
here list trace, and then what it should trace.
Yeah, the boring solution would be piping the entire output into a temporary log file and then
oh
grabbing,
no, this is, you don't
grabbing.
do this.
Yeah, this is like the old ops style when we didn't have any logging solutions, stuff like that.
Yeah. No, you can specify it. Trace. Let's try just the trace command again. But it's a different, is it a different trace command? What did you say? Just
for maybe for listen. So like when an
Just
application is opening a
That
port or
work?
something. I don't know. It's just.
Let's try it. The worst thing is it crashes. How do you, maybe, I think you have to specify something else. What would happen if I do this? Would it tell me more information? No.
It probably doesn't work on Google now.
It worked earlier, but I forgot what the command was that we were using.
Do you
That
have
was
it
the
in
problem.
your command history?
No, because it's within the node and it was within the container, and I just had to close it because it's stopped. So next time I will note it down.
Copy paste the error message into Google and see what it does.
No, this error message is related to Tracee, and it's like the specific, because this file doesn't exist on this machine. Like this thing, it just doesn't. Yeah, usually you have it, and it does this. Currently, it doesn't have it, so it's not part of the. Kind of looking for it and can't find it. But I'm just I'm trying to remember how we looked for the other one, and now I forgot. Now I feel bad. No, but what else? I don't think our documentation right now is not extensive enough. Okay, thank you, Daniel, for joining. Daniel's leaving. Yeah, let's have a separate one on Tracee specifically once I can show you more things that might be interesting.
I have probably a high-level question to Tracee. So because I'm a little bit learner in the Kubernetes space, and I know also other tools that are using eBPF. So for example, I use Falco currently to evaluate my scrolls. So what would be the benefit of using Tracee instead of Falco?
So the thing is that, so Tracee, how it works, it's basically, so it has a set of rules, a set of, these are called signatures. And they basically define what Tracee is supposed to look for, right? And it has several rules out of the box that defines how, like what things is it supposed to look for. And the thing is with Tracee and Falco, they kind of use different rules. And from what I've heard, don't quote me on this, that Falco is more high level in like the things that it's monitoring. But you can use, for example, Tracee together with Falco Sidekick or with our postie. So you could integrate with Falco Sidekick. No, I haven't done that yet either. But so Tracee is basically just it has different. It's different in some aspects. And there's a live stream that we had 2 weeks ago on the Aqua open source channel where we actually went into a bit more details of the features. There's a comparison. Oh. Question.
Okay, I told you we
can
would be
hear
talking
you.
formula rate.
Thank you. Good. So yeah, Falco is, here's a comparison.
True. That would be probably worth a look. So it was some
explanation, some further explanation. Yeah, you can also write rules in Go in Tracee. Yeah, so authoring rules. You can either do it for Rigo or for Go as well. And then you can kind of like create your own signatures of like things that it's supposed to look for. But basically the signatures that Tracee has, as far as I know, are based on like the research, like what the research team at Aqua finds and things should be looked at by Tracee, as far as I know.
Yeah, true.
So it's kind of safe to say that Tracee provides a default set of things to look at, and if you really want to extend it with rules, you can do it, but you install it and you should see something. I
Yeah.
would say, right?
Yeah. And the other benefit that also Anaïs said, it's like you have the option to have using higher level languages. So you can use Rego files and drawline files instead of writing it in the internals of Falco. So that's when you're coming from that side, would be probably simpler for people to do that. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't have to know how eBPF works under the hood really to use it.
Would be interesting to see how this works in comparison with continuous profiling with parser, where eBPF is also involved.
It would be interesting to see more the replacement in package hunter. So for replacing in the GitLab package hunter to use it there. So because I see there's a good use case for using it.
Yeah, this would be interesting as well. Maybe maybe open an issue in the GitLab package hunter repository or project.
Yeah.
Just for discussion. Yeah, in terms of questions, I think there are more open source tools from Aqua Security, right? Because I've seen KubeHunter.
So KubeHunter is used under the hood by Starboard. So you can integrate with, or it's using KubeHunter by default.
There's also KubeBench, which is for CIS benchmarks. Yeah, that's a fairly common one. You could use that.
KubeHunter and CIS bench. Is it out of the box? I always forget which ones. I have to spend more time on that.
I think the really great thing is that you can either use them in a combined integrated way, the open source tools, or you just use them as standalone scanners on your terminal or on your cluster. You can play around with them without being overwhelmed by too many terms and technology and stuff, and then move on and like building Lego bricks somehow, putting it all together and making everything more secure.
Yeah, so here you have the KubeBench reports as well for each of the nodes. But yeah, so these are basically all the report types that Starboard currently does, and yeah. Any other questions?
And a contribution question. Which way? So when I want to start contributing to open source, where should I start? What is the perfect guide? What would you recommend picking as a first issue, for example?
What would I recommend? So right now, the main thing or the most helpful thing for the community, from my perspective, would be contributing to the documentation. So just when you're using Starboard, like if you identify like a use case, or you're using Starboard already and you have a use case, just writing down the steps and sharing them in a PR. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But like right now we're just really building up that content. So that's like what I would refer you to, of like, if you would like to write and you already, or like you're using one of those tools, then it would be really great to have further tutorials and examples. That would be the main thing. And other than that, just issues 170. Yeah, you can also, I mean, the easiest I think would be to contribute to would be Trivy. Just going through, I actually haven't spent much time going through the issues, but yeah.
Yeah, but probably following like a good first issue or the specific labels just to get started with the smaller, or the, I don't know, small sounds odd, but like not trying to implement a huge feature, but thinking about smaller issues and ways to learn the code. If you're familiar with, I think Trivy is written, everything is written in Go. So like getting familiar with the code base, the code style, maybe reading existing PRs which have been merged already, to get a feel of how things are implemented. Maybe this is something I do. I'm reading the Git history and the commits to see the thought process and the design process, to like get a feel of what is needed, where could I start implementing my own changes.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely. We're definitely like, please do contribute if you are lost. Please message me. We also have a Slack channel where you can reach out to us and ask questions about each tool, and yeah, and we can help you get started as well. But yeah, documentation is something that we would love to have everybody's input on. Discord photo went well. We're using Slack.
Before we finish, I would like to ask one question.
Yes.
Regarding to Starboard. So what does Starboard with all the reports it gains? Is there any dashboard, or how can I use it?
So right now, they are all kind of separate resources in your Kubernetes cluster. So you would have to filter, for example, through the exporter that I showed earlier. For those different ones, you can use also if you want to have some UI visualization, you can use, for example, Lens. You can also have reports as PDF. That's kind of more visualized. Yeah.
But can I also do some like alerting, like, hey, here's new vulnerability on your cluster, or?
You would want to do that through Prometheus. Yeah, so you could specify like an alert manager. You could specify a rule of like when there's a critical vulnerability you want to be alerted. Yeah. And
comes the paid version with their own UI or integration? Do you know this?
Do you mean the enterprise version that has? Yes. So that's, I don't know how that interacts with Starboard. I'm not like I would. Yeah, maybe we have.
So
because when I'm enterprise, I can imagine that the people don't want to build all the reports by themselves. When I buy the product, I want something that alerts me out of the box or gives me some red alerts.
Starboard was built to make our lives easier, basically. So it used to be that the functionality of Starboard partly lived inside of Aqua Enterprise, and we saw there was definite value of kind of releasing that as an open source project. And it acts as kind of the linchpin that pulls all this stuff together. So we've been able, Aqua Enterprise is kind of a series of components, but the main one was the console, effectively the server, and it was busy doing everything. So it was a way of kind of offloading all that Kubebench, Kubehunter, Starboard, Tracee stuff to something that could manage it independently. And obviously open source just makes sense for something like that to kind of keep the pace of development. It made it cheaper for us. So that's kind of the history. That's why we broke it out like that. But it kind of, when you deploy Aqua console, you don't even know it, but you're getting Starboard by default because everything hangs off of that.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Awesome. Just gonna stop sharing. Yeah, so that's the overview. We also have, if you're interested to learn more about the details of Trivy, we have a live stream, or if you have any questions or how to contribute, how to get started, we have a live stream this Thursday on Trivy on the open source channel on YouTube as well. So you can join us there too. Yeah.
Thanks for the amazing overview and the deep dive, and also Björn with some crazy questions in between.
No, they're helpful for me to learn about the tools as well, right? Like and learn
and I think,
what kind of questions get out. Yeah.
I think it's also great to like put a not a comparison, but getting the bigger picture. There is the enterprise version, there's the open source versions. Why and how can we contribute to a greater common good? I was wondering, are you going to KubeCon EU this year?
Yes, I'm really excited. Yeah, I am. So you can say, if you see me there, say hi, wave at me, say hi, shake my hand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Then we will see each other.
Awesome.
With that,
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for joining and saying bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.